Hello again, everyone. Welcome to our next episode of the Hilltop Podcast. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Dan Karcher, longtime faculty member and do-it-all guy here at Chaminade. So thanks for joining us, Dan. Thanks for being here. How many years is this for you at Chaminade?
This is my 35th year at Chaminade.
And you've been teaching English the whole time?
No, actually I was hired as a religion teacher.
Oh, gotcha. All right, we'll get into that a little bit. And just, I know we'll get into it later, but just to kind of set the tone here, what are some of the other jobs you have or have had around campus?
So I am the sacristan. I am the Meyer House dean. I am in charge of the yearbook. I did the newspaper for a long time. I have been helpful to campus ministry in a lot of different capacities. I used to do the plays. I used to build the sets. I used to, once upon a time, there was an Earth Club that did all of the recycling. I did that for several years. I ran the summer program that you took over, and yeah, I've been
jack of all trades.
Been busy.
Well, we're going to get into a number of those as the conversation goes on, but let's rewind back to the beginnings. Where was young Dan Karcher? Are you a lifelong St. Louisan? Tell us kind of your origin story.
So I grew up in St. Mary Magdalene in the city. I am the oldest of 5 boys, and all of my brothers went to Mary Magdalene as well. My dad had gone there before me. Had a great time, and when I went to St. Mary's, I was kind of surprised by, I guess at the time I thought how adequately I was prepared. I mean, I was a good student in grade school, and actually I turned out to be a pretty good student in high school, but it just struck me like my freshman year that it was a lot more academically rigorous, I suppose, and so I kind of had to figure that out pretty quick. But I had some great teachers, and at St. Mary's my time was a lot of fun. I got involved in the plays, and I guess at the time a lot of the girls' schools were all desperate for guys, which is still the case, and vice versa. So I went to Notre Dame High School and tried out for their show, Oklahoma. And it was great because, you know, there's 10 guys and about, 80 girls. And so it was great pickings. You know, they rolled out the red carpet for you. And lo and behold, there's this one particular tender young thing who caught my eye and eventually ended up marrying her. So that turned out great. So Oklahoma has a special place in our lives.
High school sweethearts. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. We took other paths, but eventually kind of got back together again. So.
Gotcha. Well, good for you. Why theater? Had your family been involved in that? Do you just had a natural inclination? What brought you there as an interest?
I mean, I was in high school. I had never played any sports. I was in the band, and I played in the pit band for, I guess we did Annie Get Your Gun, and that kind of was my first little taste of it. It's interesting that, so then with doing the plays at St. Mary's and the plays at Notre Dame, I kind of got more and more involved and kind of took a liking to it. After I got out of college, my first teaching job, not wanting to jump ahead, but my first teaching job was actually at my old parish grade school. And I started a theater group there, the Magdalene Players, way back when. And the first production they did was Fiddler on the Roof. And it's interesting because my family was very supportive. My dad had a part in it. My mom sold the tickets, ran the house, and one of my younger brothers was in it, and another one ran the spotlight, another one helped build the set, so I had a lot of support and directed a couple of shows there. It ran for probably 20 years, I guess, the Magdalene Players, before they finally folded, and they have since destroyed the building and leveled it. So, but that was a fun experience, and so I enjoyed that.
Impactful difference that you're making. Let's take a half step back again to kind of early life. You said you had 4 brothers, is that right? 5 or
4 younger brothers.
4 younger brothers. Yeah. What was that life? What was life like in the Karcher household?
It was crazy because there was always something going on. We had a picnic table was our kitchen table because there were so many of us and people were always kind of coming in and out. I remember I was in kindergarten one year, and my parents were remodeling the kitchen, and so we had a back porch in our city house, and the back porch was not heated, but I had a pet canary, Fred Flintstone. I got to name him. And we put Fred Flintstone out in the back porch while my dad was remodeling the kitchen. And lo and behold, one day in kindergarten, I come home, and my mom has to tell me that Fred Flintstone died. I was crushed. They fortunately told me where he was buried in the backyard.
Oh, they'd already buried him.
So, fast forward, I am engaged. We're having my soon-to-be in-laws, future in-laws over, and we're in the backyard having a big party. And we're all talking, sharing drinks, and I happen to wander over there with, my to-be wife and in-laws, and there's a crowd of people, and I say, oh yeah, right here. Here is where Fred Flintstone, my bird in kindergarten, was buried, and my dad comes over and says, no, he's not. I threw that bird in the trash can years and years and years ago. Oh. It was crushed.
Even many years later. That's tough. I thought he was going to have flown away or something, but no, he truly did.
He froze to death.
He froze to death, right? He suffered a death worse than that. Gotcha. So you leave in St. Mary's. You had. Or let's talk about one more thing for St. Mary's. That's your first encounter with the Marianists, I take it. Is that right?
Yes.
You've obviously then spent a large part of the rest of your life connected to the Marianists too. Was there any early impression of the Marianists, or was that even kind of really on your radar at St. Mary's, or do you have any recollection of that?
So there were a lot of brothers. In fact, it's interesting that the chaplain my freshman year was this kind of young priest named Father Ralph Seifert. And so our paths interestingly would cross over again. A couple of other teachers that I had at St. Mary's, I also kind of crossed paths with here at Chaminade. One was Bob Schmiehausen, who was the band director. He was a whirlwind then. The band program at St. Mary's at the time was super robust. They had a gigantic band room. There were 100 people in the band. And my freshman year, there were 4 freshmen in the band, so I was fortunate to be one of those 4. And at the end of my freshman year, Bob Schmiehausen left to come to Chaminade. Gotcha. And lo and behold, I would finally catch up to him. And the other one was my sophomore biology teacher, Brother Tim Papritska. Loved him. He was awesome. He coached football, but he certainly had this very great affection for literature and things like that. And so he would come here and teach here, and then I got to be really good friends with him while he was teaching here, and he was a dorm prefect, and now he's at St. Mary's University. I'm going to visit him, but it was
wonderful.
He was a great teacher.
So what was the next stop after St. Mary's?
So then I went to UMSL for a couple of years and kind of didn't really have any direction. I ended up going to Southeast, graduated from Southeast, got involved in drama there, mostly backstage stuff, kind of technical side of things, building sets and doing lights, and had a great time. I was on stage maybe just a couple of times, did Shakespeare, that was kind of cool, was in The Tempest. Met my college roommate who was also kind of in the same boat. He was a little more English leaning than I was, but we did some theater stuff together, and ended up being that my college roommate ended up being best man at my wedding and vice versa, so that was kind of a nice little connection. Good.
So then you came back to St. Louis, and how do you end up back at your parish grade school?
So I was looking for a job, and lo and behold, they were looking for a 7th grade language arts teacher, and it was kind of like 7th and 8th grade, do all the fine art or language arts for that. So I did like English and spelling and reading and art and religion, and I guess that's about it. But it was fun. It was also kind of strange because it just so happened that my youngest brother was in 8th grade at the time. So at the time then, he had to call me Mr. Karcher, and parent-teacher conferences were really interesting.
I bet. So why education? Why did you end up interested in studying that? Why did you want to jump into that? Was it some of those early influences that you mentioned earlier in your own education, or?
It was. I mean, I liked the idea of educating. I liked the idea of, I liked the idea of helping people. I liked the idea of teaching. I liked literature. I liked writing. I liked all of those kinds of things, and to sort of give that back. And really, my freshman year at St. Mary's, I didn't feel adequately prepared. So I thought that 7th grade would be a good place to start, because then I could kind of help better prepare people for their high school journey.
So what was it like? You mentioned the parent-teacher conferences in your brother's situation, but how was some of those first days standing in front of a group of 7th graders? Do you remember those days? Were they challenging, exciting, scary?
It was pretty terrifying because, I was green as can be, right, and didn't really know what the heck was going on. And 7th graders, it's like herding cats. There were boys and girls. There were kids I knew from the neighborhood. They were my parents' friends, and so it was just a whole new experience. And I mean, I remember like one of the big punishments was, oh, you're going to stand out in the hall. Like you just stand out in the hall and you just cool off for a few minutes. And so there was one little girl who was like the gold standard of a good student. And one day, just for grins, I made her stand out in the hall and everybody had a good laugh at her. It was just a lot of fun. But
good. Good. What steps are next? Did you move into the high school world then next, or?
So my college roommate had gotten a job at St. John the Baptist High School, and he was doing drama and English. And he didn't particularly find drama suited him well, so he moved over entirely to English, and I ended up moving to St. John the Baptist and took over his drama job with English on the side. And St. John the Baptist had a little, gymatorium kind of stage, and it was, terrible acoustics, and it was like cut out of the wall, and it was just terrible. But you think, oh my gosh, I finally get to direct a real play, although I had, by then I'd already directed plays at Magdalen. So it was a lot of fun. My roommate and I always talked about how St. John's was a great place to fail. It was a very small, I think there were 30 on the faculty.
Yeah, so it's a school that's closed now, so maybe some of our listeners who don't know it or maybe sort of have heard of it in the past, give us a little sense of what that school was like, what was the community like there?
So St. John the Baptist was one of the last parish-sponsored grade schools in the Archdiocese. The only one left. High schools. That's right. The only high school remaining now is Francis Borgia. So it was co-ed. There were some nuns there. There were a lot of teachers. And they had everything under the sun. Just like Chaminade has lots of different clubs, and the teachers were always wearing a lot of different hats. So it was a great place to fail because you could try anything, absolutely anything. So I remember being out in the parking lot. I had a ring dance, and we're paper macheing this big ring that everybody walked through. I remember they wanted to have a wrestling match in the gym, so I got to light a wrestling match. I never had thought I would ever light a wrestling match, but it was fun.
Interesting. So how long were you there? And
so I was at Magdalen for 2 years. I was at St. John the Baptist for 5.
And then what's the jump to Chaminade?
I don't know. I was kind of unhappy there at St. John the Baptist, looking for something else, and I happened to run into a friend of mine from high school, Rich Wassman, who had joined the Marianists. He was a brother first, and then he was a priest, and so he and I had a very interesting relationship. He was probably my best friend in high school, and then when he joined the Marianists, he was learning to be a priest in Manitoba, Winnipeg, and we made a point to see each other twice a year. Then he became the principal for a year, and then the president at Vianney. And I would drive by Vianney twice a day, and we saw each other a whole lot less. Wow. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he found out that they were going to be looking for a teacher at Chaminade. Actually, Cafe Mo is named for Father Norbert Mellering, and I replaced him. Father Norbert was told it was time, he was kind of being put out to pasture. Father Norbert's nickname was Metro Goldwyn Mellering, because I met with him before I started, and he laid out for me 4 sheets of paper, single-spaced, and each of these titles were the titles of the movie he showed during each of the 4 quarters of his class. Gotcha. So I think I left them on the table when I left, started all over, but I was hired to teach theology. And I had gone through like the Paul VI classes, so that was like my only certification. And I guess the general consensus was that I was a relatively decent guy, so that was my official certification. It's also interesting that the principal at the time was Brother Max Baer, who hired me. He had been at St. Mary's while I was there, but I never had him, but at least I knew him or knew of him.
So what were some of your early impressions of Chaminade? Maybe some of the people that jumped out to you, some of the personalities that were here, some of the Chaminade legends that you maybe learned the culture from? Kind of what was early Chaminade life like?
So early Chaminade, the thing that impressed me when I first got here was that Chaminade was a bunch of old guys, which is so bizarre because now I am one of the old guys. On my very first day of school, actually my very first teacher meeting, one of the teachers, I was supposed to be doing assistant debate. I was one of the things I was hired for. I was the assistant debate coach, and on that morning, the first day of teacher meetings, the debate coach dropped dead.
Oh.
He never came to school. Wow. Bill Zarnicki. He never came to school, and after the meetings were over, they found out that he had a heart attack and died and was laying on the floor the morning of my first day. So one of my first official Chaminade acts was to go to see the guy I would have been working with, Bill Zarnicki, but it was just very strange. But there were a lot of old guys. There was like Gene Jackson and Joe Lavelle and Brother Feld. I shared a classroom with Wayne McKim. Of course, Mr. Z, who you know, even 35 years ago was a curmudgeon, even at that time. But there are a lot of interesting people. I mean, the drama director at the time was Anita Grunman, and one of the first things I was supposed to do was to build the sets. And so I would kind of meet with her, and she had some vague notion of what she wanted, and I would just kind of build everything, and we would hang lights in Jergens, and it was just it was great fun.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit. Certainly, a passionate area of mine of Jergens as a theater. What were some of the challenges or maybe crazy stories of doing theater in that space, which is not the greatest space to do theater, even at that time, 35 years ago, I can imagine. So, any recollections, funny stories, crazy stories, impressive stories?
So, the drama program today is amazing, and the drama program back then was constantly fighting for a seat at the table because it was a gym, and everybody and their brother wanted to use the gym, and so you had to kind of fight just to get gym space and to put on a play. You know, it's kind of hard to hang lights while they're playing volleyball because that kind of changes the focus a lot when they keep getting hit with volleyballs. And it's only so wide, so you need to figure out how to get everything on and off, and there's zero wing space, and so a lot of times for the musicals we'd kind of build out, or we'd have a band, and we'd for Hello Dolly we made a little ring, and the band sat in the middle. What I ended up doing a lot for the bigger shows is just kind of move over to the side of the gym, and that presented problems with lighting because all of the lighting posts that were pre-designated were aimed toward Jergens, toward the stage. So I had to figure out how to create lighting positions up in the rafters. And so I bought some triangular truss and would go up and remove the ceiling tiles so I could tie off onto the I-beams to have a span of like 40 feet truss we'd tie off in several places, and then two on the side kind of angled, and then because everybody was seated on the ground, we would build up the stage, elevate the stage, and the audience would sit on the floor. One time we did a show in the Round. We did Jesus Christ Superstar in the Round. It was an amazing show. It was probably one of the more memorable shows I've ever done here at Chaminade.
That was going to be my next question. What is, from those Jergen days, what is maybe your most memorable production or the set that you were most excited about, or the show that you were most excited about?
So we came across Jesus Christ Superstar because of John Willard, who was an excellent guitarist, and because he could play all the music, that was the big in. Plus, we had probably the two great actors during my time was Kyle Dugan and Cody Stokes, and they were Jesus and Judas, and so they were great. And there was also a dorm student who will always stick out in my mind, Minkyu Lee, who played Herod. But just to be in the Round was much more intimate, and so there were 4 places to come in, and the audience, because we were in the Round, the audience was never more than 4 or 5 rows away, and so it was a very intimate thing. The girl who played Mary Magdalene was in a car accident on the way to opening night, and she was just a nervous wreck, and just trying to calm her down. It was just a lot of fun. It was very impressive, and people, after the first performance, the word of mouth, and so we sold out all the other nights. It was just very cool.
Good.
But there are a lot of other good shows. I mean, we did Damn Yankees. I used to do a popular show and then a not so popular show. So Damn Yankees might be followed by something like Boys from Syracuse or The Robber Bridegroom, or just kind of lesser known. 1776 was the first big on the side of the gym show, and that was a lot of fun, a lot of great people in it. Mark Laurie was in it. He took a role early on, and so that was fun.
Good. So what what was campus life like back, again, sort of in your early days, 30 plus years ago, in terms of clubs, activities, in terms of also kind of even like the physical campus? What have you seen change? Certainly it's changes. What sort of stood out to you in some of those early days of sort of the non-academic life things? Theater, certainly, other stuff.
So in the early days when I first got here, the new wing was about half the size that it is now. And there were 3 classrooms on each side. In the center was
that's McBride, what
yeah,
we call now McBride Hall, just to clarify, right?
And the center was just this giant storage area. And you could find anything under the sun shoved in there because it was the repository of everybody's junk. And so they were always talking about, oh, we're going to have engineers figure out what we can do with this, if we can use it for real space. And then one time they figured, oh, light bulb moment, we can make this thing happen. Where kind of the library is now was another building, and that was the maintenance facility right back there. And Brother Irv had every part that had ever been created. And Brother Irv could fix anything. Absolutely anything. In Juergens, we used to have to cover the floor with this carpeting. There were these big, giant, 20-foot long rolls of carpet, and Brother Irv created this apparatus that would hoist up the carpet and roll it out and move it, and it was just amazing. But it was also a giant pain to have to house these things. You know, there was never any room for any of the drama stuff. So like one year they decided, because there's no room, like at once upon a time the middle school locker room kind of close to Cemetery Lane, that was my storage area. And then they decided, well, we need that for a locker room. Then they put a trailer on the far end of the old tennis courts. And so all of the flats and everything had to be stored in the trailer all the way over there. So if you wanted anything, you had to haul it all the way back. It was kind of a pain. But eventually they moved, like, on the 4th floor. The 4th floor where all the classrooms are now, where Mr. Mass's room, that used to be cut up into little offices. And there was an office for the yearbook, for the newspaper, for all these different groups had offices. And so the yearbook was, for the most part, in the early years when I was here, created in that office up on the 4th floor. And then they got rid of those and made it other things. One of my favorite years was the year they decided to add on to the new wing, or create the new wing, because the architects said that in order for school to be able to open on time, we need to close school 2 weeks early. Obviously, everyone was terribly crushed at that news.
Student body especially, I'm sure. Tears were shed. So we wrapped up the semester, but in order to kind of be legit, then the teachers had to stay and do things for the next 2 weeks. But still, to see them poke the hole in the back end and surprisingly, it was ready to go. Did it work?
When school opened? You know, it's not like they were going to close something and well, we're going to, in 6 months we'll think about getting started. It was finished on time, and it was a great deal. And so, where the middle school office is now, used to be like that whole suite of offices used to be one big classroom. It was a classroom, and it had tiered seating and chairs that swiveled around, and that was my classroom. And that was kind of like the drama classroom. We did one-act shows in there. A parent kind of created a lighting system with those big clip lights, and we performed in there. But that was my classroom. But kind of like the library tech room, it was kind of everybody in their brother's classroom as well. So there was like not a lot of sacred space.
Sharing space there. So how'd you make the move from the religion teaching to English? And was that over time, little by little, or was it?
It was pretty early on. I was maybe a couple of years in, but I was, I kind of taught the religion courses through books. Like I remember reading Black Like Me and Alive, which is about the story of the soccer team that crashed in the Andes, and they end up, you know, kind of snowed in, and it was more of a literature kind of based thing. And then they said, well, you're teaching all this literature anyway, why don't you just, you know, go next door and you can teach in the English department. When I first started in the English department, I think Bob Johnson was the department chair, and then it was Jerry Boyle, I guess I worked pretty closely with Jerry and kind of figured things out. And Then one day he decided that he didn't want to be department chair anymore, and like ever since then, I don't know how many years I've been department chair, like probably 15, 16, 17, I don't know. It just kind of all runs together.
So have you always taught, you're known now for sophomores. Have you always had the sophomores, or when did you kind of settle into that?
So Jim Gerker was the sophomore American Lit teacher.
Oh, he was before.
And then he went to be principal, and he was principal for 14 years. So when he left to become principal, I kind of took his sophomore classes. And he left kind of big shoes to fill, but I loved sophomore American Lit. And then when he was no longer principal, he had this little escape clause that says he would come back to the classroom. So I was department chair, and he's coming back to take all of the classes that I had taught for the last 14 years. So I had to find another place for myself. So at the time, I moved to junior year, which was Brit Lit at the time. And it was odd because then I had the same students 2 years in a row, and I did that for a few years. And then Jim eventually left, and then I got to come back to American Lit, which was great fun again. And but I mean, I taught different drama classes early in my career as well. You know, where the actually kind of the back end of the office is, where like Mr. Rohn's office is, and Mr. Denoyer, and then the college counseling office. That used to be one big classroom, and that was kind of the drama classroom. So I had taught in there for a while. Prior to that, that used to be the chapel for the school.
Right.
So, yeah, so I taught a number of things, but I've taught the American Lit for a long time. And really, there are a lot of things I like about the American Lit class. I like that it's sophomores. They are always wise fools. But I also have this great affection for the literature. Like every time I go through certain things, like we're, reading The Crucible, it's like, I love that it's so meaty and you can sink your teeth into it. And I'm good friends with Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson and all these authors that I've read year in and year out. It's like, I feel like I know them personally because of having taught all of their works. So
a kind of related question to that, what, I assume getting young boys sophomores to read is not always the easiest thing. What do you enjoy about that challenge, about the idea of getting these young men to read who might, especially today's day and age, might be on their phone or attention spans and all that sort of thing? What's that dynamic like?
So I always tell the parents at parent-teacher conferences that, or I guess back to school night, that one of the things I like about my class is that I require them to read books outside of class. And I am of the belief that all they need is that one book, that one little light bulb moment where reading is going to click for them, and it's going to open up this whole new world of reading for them. And so it's just a matter of finding that one book. And so over the course of my class, they're going to be exposed to at least 6 different books, and hopefully one of them will make a difference, and that will kind of spark their interest, because as I tell the parents, they're going to be reading for the rest of their lives. The sooner they figure out how to embrace it and how to like it and how to use it for what it's intended to do, to entertain, to inform, to do all these great and wonderful things, the better off they're going to be. And if they learn that sooner, they're going to be much better students for it. The more you read, it increases your vocabulary, and it just gives you the sense of satisfaction. Like I find myself a lot of times when I'm grading things, I'm reading a lot of essays or something, I need to take a break. And to take a break, I read something that I want to read and not something that some student has written. So, I mean, I like the idea of getting them to figure out how to read. And I think that, social media is a big problem for us because it feeds into their limited attention span, and it helps them to be instantly gratified, which is a problem because in a book that's 300 or 400 pages long, you have to read the whole thing to have that gratification. And so I think that social media is kind of doing everybody a gross disservice. It's interesting too. In the good old days, when you would walk through the atrium, which would be the holding pen for all the middle school before their parents picked them up, it was a zoo because it was so loud and rowdy. And now you walk through and it's deathly silent because, it used to be the TVs were the one-eyed monster. Now their cell phone is the one-eyed monster.
To touch on somebody you mentioned, certainly a Chaminade legend earlier, Mr. Z, somebody who, at least from my 12 years here and when he was here, I sort of associated you guys, shared some space in the library a little bit, certainly had your sacristan duties related to. So at least in my eyes, somebody I felt like you were sort of spent a lot of time with. What's give the audience your take on Mr. Z. What did he? Yes, a curmudgeon for his whole time here, even when he was young. But what were some of the great things he brought to the Chaminade community, and or maybe a funny story about the curmudgeon too?
Mr. Z was amazingly generous. However, Mr. Z was also an acquired taste. There's this. I used to tell people, if you are a first-year teacher, he will not talk to you for the first year, unless you're a woman, and then it'll be 5 years before he'll actually talk to you. But if once you got through that initial barrier, he would do anything for you. I mean, basically, he lived for Chaminade. He never lived very far. I mean, I took him home hundreds and hundreds of times. He lived in Kirkwood. And the amazing thing about his home in Kirkwood was I would pull up, he would get out, he'd check the mailbox, and he would walk in. He never, ever locked his door. Never did he lock his door. I would ask him if he was going to the faculty Christmas party. You know, it's like 6 weeks away, and he would tell me, oh no, I'll be sick that day. He would walk through, you know, when things are going on, but he never would. You know, and they
I always love those that it's right there in the cafeteria is the party, and he's 20 feet away over in his office, but doesn't make an appearance or, you know, sort of walks through briefly. Yeah.
I mean, he liked to play his solitaire, and, you know, these little games, they would chirp, and I would come in, and he would be sound asleep, but, you know, the games were still playing. He would always feel the need to give me a Christmas present. And my Christmas present was something and a bottle of booze. And I have no idea what the booze was. I don't think that he did, because he didn't drink. So he would just go into the store and just buy the funkiest looking bottle, and that was what he would give me. He was always very good on giving marital advice. He would always tell me that, you know, if there's anything you need, any problem, flowers and chocolate were his answer to every marital issue.
From someone never married, right?
Of course.
Yes.
But he had his office, and when people came back, he is who they wanted to see. He had a memory that stretched back, and he knew everything about everybody. And he was very helpful. He liked to counsel people, and he had a lot of favorite phrases like, "Can I push on you a little bit?" It's like, in other words, you want me to do something that I probably don't want to do, but it's probably for the good of the school, and so I would certainly entertain it. But I would come up here on Sunday afternoons. I used to come up and do all my homework on Sunday afternoons, and he would be up here. And he would be here on Saturday evening, and he would be here on Sunday, and keeping the library open for everybody and their brother. He would see to it that there were always servers for all of the masses outside, and flowers for all the masses outside. And I believe that both of these things he paid for out of his own pocket. He got different stipends for things, and he just put it into a separate account, and then he paid them out of that account. He didn't come to, when he got his whatever, you know, anniversary every 5 years, you know, he would never come to any of those. I was, when he died, it's funny, it's not a funny story, but it's a story. When he died, he had not been in for a couple of days, and I suspected that something was amiss. So I went over to his house, and the reason why I know that something was amiss, because I went up to his door, and his door was locked. Oh, gotcha. So that's kind of how something is not right here. Interesting, interesting. So I remember going over to his house with Jim Eppie and Father Pat Christopher, and we were kind of looking for his will, to see if we could find his will. And if you had gone into Mr. Z's office, he was sort of a closet hoarder. Mm-hmm. He could tell you what's exactly in every single pile, but there were piles of everything. And his house was that to the nth degree. Same, huh? Yes. Sure. So we looked all over trying to find it, but it was interesting to kind of revisit Mr. Z's place. Yeah, and as you said earlier, you know, somebody that the alums flocked to when they were back on campus,
But, you know, if you were an outsider, just to see him interact with somebody the most curmudgeonly or the most sort of, you know, like, this is the guy everyone loves. But yeah, including my own son, who, you know, somebody that the alums just, you know, universally sort of loved and admired, even though he wasn't giving off, you know, vibes.
Right, the warm fuzzies.
The warm fuzzies, right.
So I remember when he died, it was like at the very beginning of COVID.
Right.
Because that year we postponed graduation and had graduation in July on the field where every chair was 6 feet apart. And I remember walking down Cemetery Lane with Father Ralph, and Z had just died. And Ralph was telling me, oh yeah, Z went out the way that Z wanted to go out. You know, not a lot of, you know, not in the middle of school year, not a lot of pomp and circumstance, just kind of in the middle of the summer, just kind of slipped away. And it's like, that is exactly what he would have wanted. That
is the truth. So what you mentioned earlier, and this plays off of Father Z, Mr. Z, as well too, sort of your sacristan duties. What does that mean? I know we see you moving about at Mass, and what does that entail for being the sacristan at Chaminade?
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Right.
So a lot of times, all the time, I kind of set everything up to all the needs for Masses, because we have servers who serve annually. I kind of run interference with them and kind of help them out. I schedule all of the Eucharistic ministers and kind of see that they're all in place. I talk with Father, you know, there's an ordo, which is kind of the readings for the day and the color of the vestments, and set all that up, and just whatever needs to be done in order to physically make the Mass happen. That's kind of my job.
One other topic to take us in a different direction we haven't talked at all about is the house system. Certainly you were here at Chaminade before the house system and since for many years now. Just to talk a little more generally, what do you think the house system has brought to the campus community? How has it changed the Chaminade community maybe? What's your sort of take on that?
So I think that the house system has been a great improvement for Chaminade. It is, you know, in its early days, the easy way to explain it was to compare it to Harry Potter. The movies were very popular, and there's kind of the sorting hat, and you're in one of the 5 houses. But it's also been good for kind of building relationships vertically as opposed to horizontally. So like all the sophomores would know all the sophomores because they would have them in class, and that's where that relationship would stop. But now with the house system, you have, you know, as a freshman, you're going to know seniors. As a 6th grader, you're going to know seniors. And I think it's been very good for building relationships. And so the house system has kind of grown since then. We hosted the very first House System Institute, and there's been probably half a dozen of them since. We hosted it a second time. It's been in Seattle. It's been in Louisville, Kentucky. Other schools have kind of jumped on board. Because we were one of the first in the nation to kind of do this, we're kind of looked to as like, well, how did you do this and how did you do that? And so we've had some growing pains as well. When it first started, it was picked up from a school in Australia. Jim Gerker went down there, and he sent a couple of people down there to kind of get the vibe of how we could embrace that ourselves. You know, we had to change our vocabulary, so we no longer had homeroom. We had mentor group, and I think that part of that was so that students could no longer do their homework in homeroom. Mm-hmm. You can do your mentor work, but no. But so that was just kind of an aside. In the early days, it was very activity-oriented. There was always fun and games all the time, and now we've kind of taken a more serious tone by having the Monday discussions. We still meet with the seniors on Wednesday. We try to give them something to do, kind of empower them to be actual senior leaders. It seems like we have more mentors in mentor group. There are now, most of the mentor groups all have 2 mentors, so it's great because now it's another adult in the room that can help form relationships with the students. I mean, even in your classes, you're not going to form a connection with everybody, but hopefully with another teacher in the room, maybe they will. So I think the house system has been great. And
you're a dean. How long have you been a dean?
I have no idea.
You have no idea. But not since the beginning. You weren't one of the original.
I was not one of the original, but I came on pretty shortly thereafter. In fact.
And what? Go ahead.
I was originally in the O'Donnell house, and I guess I remember Joe Poon being the dean of the. He was an art teacher. He was he was the dean of the O'Donnell house, and there was somebody left, and so we became a dean, and I was dean with Mr. Z for the Meyer house. Mr. Rohn was the original Meyer House dean with Mr. Z. So I'm sure that he has no bias when it comes to, you know, the Meyer House and the house competition. None at all.
Of course. Why were you interested in getting involved in the dean level? It seemed like you had plenty of other things on your plate. What was important enough about that?
It's kind of a selfish thing. I like to know what is going on. I want to be involved. I don't want to just sit back on my laurels and just kind of let other people run the show when I would have an opportunity to step up and to kind of have a hand in the direction of which way the house system goes. And so I don't know how strong my hand has been in that, but I've been in a dean for probably, I don't know, maybe close to 20 years, maybe. I don't know, but I've had some, you know, like Will Arman was my co-dean for a long time, and Jack Twellman, and now Dario, and so I've had some good people to work with.
Good, good. Taking us on again a little different path, a personal connection. You went back and earned your master's and then your doctorate degree, and worked very closely with my wife doing that. Why was that important to you to further your education, to earn your doctorates? I don't know, 8 years ago now, something like that. 10 years ago.
I guess being in mid-career, I wanted to do something more. And I was entertaining the possibility of getting my doctorate as a way to maybe advance my career, but even just to know more about what it is I'm supposed to be doing, kind of change my perspective. In a way, it was a great way to recharge my batteries. You know, it was great fun to sink my teeth into something much more academic. And speaking of your wife, when we got to the doctoral level, we went through as a cohort. And so being in Molly's cohort, we would meet every Sunday afternoon, and we would, you know, meet for 3, 4, I'm sure you missed her because Sunday afternoons we were, you know, hitting the books and writing this, that, and the other thing. And it was great to go through because a lot of times you do something and then there's something else to do. And so having a cohort was great because it helped you to process what you were doing. You know, even like the Southmore Road to Freedom trip I just took with Dr. Schmidt, you know, we would do all these things, and because he and I were kind of riding ahead in our car to do different things, we had hours to talk about different things, and we would process what was happening. And so the doctoral process was great for processing what we were doing, and it was an awesome experience. I thought the day after I got my doctorate that right now I am the smartest that I am ever going to be, because as soon as it's done, I was so much crammed in, I'm just going to start to forget. We also did a master's first and then the doctorate. And I remember the master's, there was a big test, and the test was every class you had, every instructor would write a question or two, and you'd get to pick and choose. And you could bring any resource you had. So everybody brought their milk crate full of all their notes. And they would all cram their minds and their milk crate full of stuff. The exam for the doctorate was very similar, except that after each instructor would write their question, there were no notes you could bring in. So it's like, it was a little stressful.
Be crammed, be crammed. We haven't talked much about your family. You mentioned your wife and being high school sweethearts and stuff. Give the audience a little sense of family and children and what they're up to now.
So we have 2 daughters, and if I had it to do all over again, I should have gone to a girls' school because I could have had 7 years of free tuition for both girls. Instead, I got half tuition for both, but I really liked the time at Chum. Better than nothing, absolutely. So, so my oldest daughter is Molly, and she is a lawyer, married with 2 sons, grandsons, and for me. And it's so weird because I had daughters and now I have grandsons, so it's just kind of having to switch gears a little bit. And then my other daughter is also married, Libby, and she works for FedEx, runs an office for them, and it's great. We get together, you know.
They're both here in St. Louis?
They are finally both in here.
Right.
Actually, when they went to, Molly went to Coriezu, Libby went to Notre Dame, but they both ended up at Rockhurst, did very well. When it was time for graduation, Molly went to Mizzou Law. I graduated on a Thursday with my doctorate. Libby graduated on Saturday with her bachelor's, and Molly graduated on Sunday with her law degree.
Wow.
It was a whirlwind weekend.
Heck of a weekend for you guys. Well, look into the future a little bit. What does the future look like? Not that you have to like say how many years you got left or whatever, but like what are you hoping to do here in the future?
I think that one of the things that is that makes Chaminade what it is the people who work here. The students also, but the students are here for a finite amount of time, whereas the teachers are here for as long as they want to be. There is great longevity. I mean, really, I think that for me to have been here for 35 years is a testament not only to me and my dedication to the school, but the school's dedication to having teachers who are so long tenured at this institution. And the relationships that you form, like as I walk the halls and see all these teachers, I know everybody. I have, in one course or another, through different hats that I've worn, I have crossed paths with just about every teacher here. Doing the yearbook, I make a point to know all the new teachers just so I can be sure that their ID cards match and to get them in their name spelled correctly in the yearbook. And so I have this longevity about me, and I'm not ready to roll up my toes just yet.
Good for you. Well, we always wrap up with one last question. It's the same for everybody. Is modeled on our school motto of Esto Vir. We'd love to get every guest's take on what Esto Vir means to them, or how that sort of phrase has special resonance in their life, maybe. So, what does Esto Vir mean to Dan Karcher?
I think Esto Vir is a challenge for everyone to be the best that they can be, and every day is not going to be your best day. But that doesn't mean that tomorrow can't be a better day. So I think that a lot of the challenge is to just continually strive to be the best you can be.
Good. Nice. A nice succinct answer. I love that. Very specific. So thank you again, Dan, for joining us. Thanks for all you have done and continue to do for our school community and for our students. And thank you guys for joining us for another episode of The Hilltop.